I've given this company everything, and this is how you repay me. You will regret this.
What would you do if you were handed a pink slip for being too good at your job? What if that lie was a carefully constructed mask for years of racial bias and systemic discrimination? This is the story of a single, silent room where a lifetime of unspoken truths was about to be unleashed. For Lena, the sterile white walls of this office weren't just a space. They were a cage built of a million tiny slights and a lifetime of struggle. But tonight, under the harsh glow of the fluorescent lights, the simple conversation was about to become an unfiltered battle for her dignity and her truth. This is the moment she decided to stop being a victim and start being a warrior. Opposite her, Mr. Harrison, her department head, shuffled papers with an air of practiced detachment. The late hour had bled the pretense from his face, revealing a tired, calculating gaze. "Lena, let's be frank," he began, his voice a low, gravelly monotone. "Your performance reviews are stellar. Your project numbers, impeccable. But we've made a strategic decision to restructure. It's a cost-saving measure." His words, meant to be a professional balm, were daggers of racial discrimination. They were a narrative she had heard before, a familiar, coded language that disguised an ugly truth. For 6 years, she had poured her life into this company. She had watched colleagues, men, mostly all of them white, rise on the back of her ideas, her late nights, her intellectual property. Her last performance review, the one that was supposedly stellar, had a subtle, yet unmistakable, undercurrent of racial bias. It had praised her resilience and work ethic, words that, for a black woman in a corporate setting, were often a euphemism for her having endured relentless prejudice. Lena took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the reflection of the single overhead light bulb in the glossy table. The reflection warped and stretched, a metaphor for the distorted reality she was being presented. This wasn't a cost-saving measure. It was a lie. This was the culmination of countless microaggressions, the casual dismissal of her suggestions in meetings, the assumption that her tone was too aggressive, the constant need to prove her worth over and over again. This was the silent, insidious power of systemic racism. "Mr. Harrison, with all due respect," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor of rage in her chest. "I think we both know this isn't a restructure. This is a termination, and it's a direct result of the racial injustice that has been festering in this department for years." His face tightened. The mask of calm professionalism slipped entirely. "Lena, that's a very serious accusation. I won't tolerate it. This is a business decision, purely objective." "Objective?" she laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed in the quiet room. "What's objective about the constant overlooking of my contributions? What's objective about you giving the lead on the Project Phoenix to Mark, a man who has half my experience and not even a tenth of my success rate on similar projects? Was that objective, or was it another manifestation of unspoken prejudice?" She leaned forward, her gaze now a steel trap, catching him off guard. "Let me tell you a story of racism you won't read in a corporate handbook. 6 months ago, I presented a new marketing strategy. You looked right through me, and then 3 weeks later, praised Mark for presenting the same exact idea, just with a different font. Was that objective?" He squirmed, visibly uncomfortable. "That's not what happened. You're misremembering." "Am I?" Lena's voice was a low, dangerous whisper. "I remember every detail. I remember the way you all looked at me when I spoke, as if I was a disruption. I remember the subtle slights, the backhanded compliments. This isn't about a restructure. This is about you, and people like you, being terrified of my value. You can't handle the fact that a black woman could be not just good at her job, but the best. You want to believe it's a fluke, a coincidence, a story that doesn't fit your comfortable, predictable narrative." A single tear of frustration and defiance rolled down her cheek. It wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the physical manifestation of the exhaustion that came with fighting a battle she was never supposed to win. For years, she had buried this pain, telling herself it was just part of the corporate game. But in this moment, in this room, she was done pretending. This was her truth, her narrative, her raw and honest lived experience. "You see my strength as a thread," she continued, her voice rising with each word. "You see my confidence as arrogance. You see my dedication as something to be exploited but never rewarded. You think by cutting me, you're cutting cost. You're not. You're cutting the very thing this company needs to thrive. You're sacrificing innovation, talent, and true leadership because of your own deep-seated racial bias." Mr. Harrison stared at her, the usual dismissive retort caught in his throat. He saw her not as a problem employee, but as a person, a woman, who was finally giving voice to a pain he had inflicted. The air was thick with the weight of her words. She was not just speaking for herself. She was speaking a truth that resonated far beyond this room. A truth about the millions of others who have a similar story of racial bias. And in that moment, Lena realized her true value wasn't in the projects she completed or the praise she received. Her true value was in her truth, in her refusal to be silent. Her strength was not in her resilience to endure, but in her courage to confront. This wasn't an ending. It was a new beginning. She stood up, her posture radiating a newfound sense of power. "You can have your restructure, Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice now filled with a quiet dignity. "But you won't be able to restructure the truth. I will not be defined by your prejudice." She walked out of the room, not a victim, but a victor. The city lights outside the glass walls now seemed to shine just for her, not a cage, but a canvas. She had given voice to the Black experience, and in doing so had freed herself. The fight for anti-racism wasn't just a social movement. It was a personal revolution that began inside this room, with a single brave voice refusing to be silenced. Her story was a powerful testament to the fact that while racial discrimination can try to break a person, it cannot erase their true value, their unyielding strength, or the profound power of their truth. This was her moment of empowerment. The cold conference room had been the stage for her final act, but the rest of her life, a life built on her own terms and her own truths, was just about to begin.